Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Emily, and in today's video I am going to be going through every single book that I read in 2023. I honestly can't believe I'm sitting down filming another YouTube video already. It feels like I finished my book list videos yesterday, but it's already been over a week since I posted my last book list video, which is absolutely crazy. So obviously, as you can tell by the title, in today's video I'm going to be going through every single book that I read in 2023. I'm only going to give you a couple of sentences and a rating for each book, otherwise we will be here for hours. But I have been posting monthly wrap-up videos on my channel since about April this year, so if you want to go and see more in-depth reviews for each book, definitely go and watch those. Now, I'm not going to be going through these in the order that I read them in, just because it's going to be really hard for me to get books out of the piles. So I'm just going to be grabbing all of the physical books and going through them first, and then I'm going to go through the books that I read on my Kindle. So the first book is Never Never by Colleen Hoover and Tarryn Fisher. I honestly didn't really like this book at all. I really liked the concept of it, but I didn't like the way it was actually done in the book and executed. So I think I gave this 3.5 stars, but I'd honestly probably give it like 2 stars now looking back at it. Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is just like a YA thriller mystery, and I actually really enjoyed this one. There were some parts of it that were really boring, but I feel like it's going to be a really good series when I continue the series, and I think I gave this one 4 stars. Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This is a small town romance. It kind of gives off cowboy vibes, and I did really like the story, but there wasn't enough of a story and there was too much smut in the book, and for that reason I gave it 3 stars. If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin. This one was actually a really disappointing read for me. I was actually expecting to go into this book and just love it straight away, but honestly I didn't like it just because the first chapter of the book spoils the whole ending of the book, and because I already knew what was going to happen, I didn't feel connected to the characters because I obviously didn't want to get hurt. I just didn't like anything about this, and the way that the main character just wears tiaras all the time, I just found that part really cringy, and honestly just like it made me want to DNF the book. I think I gave this 4 stars when I finished it, but I'd give it 3 looking back at it. Then I finished the rest of the Shatter Me series. So I read up to Ignite Me last year, which is actually where the series was originally supposed to end, and this year I was like really sick for a week, so I decided to just binge the rest of the series, and I read the rest of these books in like 2 or 3 days, and I absolutely love this series. It's so easy to read, and it's so easy if you're trying to get into like fantasy or like dystopian sort of books. They're technically not fantasy, but these are just so easy to read. They're so fast paced, and it will just keep you on the edge of your seat the whole time. There's so much stuff that happens in these books. The only one I didn't like out of these was the novella at the end, which is Believe Me. This is just like a little love story. It's kind of like their little romance, and I just didn't think it was really necessary to the book, so you definitely don't need to read this. And the things that happened in Imagine Me at the end of it was what was retold in this book anyway, so it just didn't really make any sense to read it. But I did still read this. I gave it 2 stars. I think the rest of them were like between 3 and 4 stars. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This one I absolutely loved, but I just don't like recommending it because of the topics in the book. You definitely need to look up trigger warnings if you're going to go into this. This was a 6-star read for me. Absolutely amazing, phenomenal writing. It just felt so lyrical and beautiful, but at the same time as that, it absolutely crushed my soul, and I still think about this book all the time. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is one of the first fantasies I read, and now all I want to do is read fantasies. I say this all the time, but it kind of gives like the Hunger Games vibes, but the main characters have all these different powers, but our main character is actually an ordinary and doesn't have any powers, so she has to act like she does have powers. This was another 6-star read. I absolutely loved this, and I cannot believe it's a debut novel. Heir of Broken Fate by Mads Rafferty. I bought this book when I saw this author on TikTok and absolutely loved it. I gave this book 5 stars as well. I honestly can't really remember like all the details in this book and what actually happened, but I know that I loved it and I loved the writing, and I'm very excited for the second book to come out because I have seen the cover. She did show me the cover and it is absolutely stunning, and I just can't wait to have them both on my bookshelves. Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Now I'm showing this now, but I actually read this after the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, which I'll talk about a bit later, and I really wish I read this trilogy first because I didn't really connect with this book and I didn't really like this book, but I feel like if I read it first I would have liked it a lot more. And I do still need to continue this series and finish this trilogy, but I just feel like this book was a bit of a letdown for me, so I gave it 3.5 stars. The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. People say that this is very similar to like Criminal Minds, and I absolutely loved this. Following this group of teenagers who get taken by the FBI to help them solve these unsolved crimes from the past, and all of these teenagers have these like special abilities to help the FBI. For example, one of them can tell when someone's lying. This book was so fast paced and easy to read, and I cannot wait to finish this series in 2024. Summer at Pine Lake by Alyssa Delpar. This was actually my first ever book that I read as an ARC, and I read it on my Kindle. And then when the author actually released the book, she sent it to me, and I absolutely loved this. It kind of gives like the Summer I Turned Pretty vibes. It's very much like a YA romance, but it's just very, very fast paced and easy to get through. It's only about 200 pages, and I gave this one 4 stars. Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This is like one of my first ever dark romances, and it's actually a Peter Pan reimagining, but make it a dark romance. And it's the first book in the Never After series. I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I thought that I was going to go into this and hate it because of the reviews that I've seen on this book. All I saw was people absolutely hating this book, but I gave it 3.5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think that I will enjoy the rest of the series a lot more. Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. I honestly don't really remember much about this book because I did listen to it as an audiobook. That's the only reason why I picked it up, because I think it was like a free audiobook or something. And I remember that it was definitely like one of my favorites that I've read from her, but I just don't remember anything about what it's about. I have no recollection of this book, but I did give it 4 stars. The Deal by Al Kennedy. This is the first book in the Off Campus series, and it's actually the first book that I read in 2023 as well. And it's the only book I read in the series for the whole year because I tried to read the second book and I DNF'd it. But I absolutely loved this one. It's a fake dating trope, and it's also set in like a college. And I just loved the characters. I loved the vibes. It was just so easy to read, so I gave this one 5 stars. The Summer of Broken Rules by Kate L. Walther. Again, I went into this one expecting not to love it as much as I did. I think I gave this one 5 stars as well. It is such a summery romance. Like, I read this in peak winter, and I really, really wish that I saved it for summer and read it in summer because I feel like the vibes would have been 100 times better and just immaculate. But I didn't, unfortunately, but I still did love this book, and I know it's a very hyped up book. I think a lot of people have read it by now, but if you haven't, I highly recommend it. Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is another one that I've been putting off for such a long time. This is like one of those original hyped up books on BookTok, and I was just worried that it wasn't going to live up to the hype, but let me tell you, it does, because I'm obsessed with this book. I still think about the characters in this book. Liz and Wes are like the blueprint for what couples should be like, and I just loved their relationship so much. I loved the movie aspect of it, and again, it was just such a fast-paced, easy book to read and kind of like a palate cleanser as well. And that was another 5-star read. Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. This is like my first ever dark romance that I read, and this was very, very mortifying, but I still did like it, and I was hooked throughout the whole book. It's such a hard one because I 100% understand why people hate this book and don't want to recommend it and don't like it, and I don't recommend it either because of those aspects of it and the trigger warnings in this book, but I still did like it. And I gave it 5 stars when I finished it, but looking back, I'd probably give it like 4 stars because the topics in this book and some of the things that happen, like, I'm literally still mortified by, so I don't really know what to rate this or what to like say about this book because I don't want to recommend it to people, but I liked it myself. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This was another 6-star read. I went into this not expecting to like it because it is a literary fiction and there's like not much romance in this book. It is about 2 kids who grow up together playing video games, and then something happens and they're just not friends anymore, and then 10 years later they bump into each other in a train station and they decide to make a little pact to create a video game together, and that's what we're following the whole book. I absolutely loved this book, and even though there's not much romance in this book, I still think that the main characters in this book are soulmates, and in my head they're together because I want them to be together. Flock by Kate Stewart. This was actually the last book I read in 2023, so this is kind of a bit all over the place, as you can tell, but I cannot believe how long I put off reading this book. Like, oh my god, I'm obsessed with this. I went straight into the second book. I also went out of my way to find these covers because I have this cover, but like, why would you want this cover when you can have this one? Like, this one is gorgeous. I'm obsessed with these covers, and the book was just as good. I went into it like completely blind, having no idea what it's actually about, and I still can't even explain what it's about. But if you've read this book, the boat scene, that's all I'm gonna say. And this was another 5-star read. Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. These were both 6-star reads. I am obsessed with this series. I just love the world and the characters that Stephanie Garber created in this universe, and I read these towards the beginning of the year and then read Caraval a lot after, as I said before, and I still haven't read the 3rd book in this trilogy yet because I am going to do a reread of these before I go into that to refresh my memory. But I just remember how magical these felt, and they just felt like a fairy tale, and I was just hooked from the beginning and didn't want to put them down. Binding and Keeping 13 by Chloe Chloe Walsh. These are some more 6-star reads. These are the first 2 books in the Boys of Torment series. I still need to continue this series, but this series is very, very intimidating because all of the books are like over 800 pages. Even though when you're going into them, they don't actually feel that long and they feel fast-paced somehow, they're still intimidating thinking about going into them because of the size. But Johnny and Shannon are my favorite book couple ever. I don't think anything will ever top them, and they have a very like special place in my heart. I think that they're just such like beautifully written characters who have so much like emotional baggage at the same time, and these books are just so much deeper than you'd imagine. Like going into a rugby romance, that is like the bare minimum of what these books actually are. The Long Game by Elena Armas. I don't really have anything to say about this book. I did not like this book at all. I gave it 2 stars. I wanted to DNF it the whole time, but for some reason I pushed myself to finish it, and I just think that I did not like any of the characters in this book. I felt no chemistry between the 2 characters, and even though it was like enemies to lovers, it was just done so badly, and I just found the characters very irritable, and I just didn't enjoy any aspect of it. Normal People by Sally Rooney. This one I listened to as an audiobook because of the no talking marks in the physical copy. I knew that I wasn't gonna like that, and I 100% understand why people love this book if they connect with it. I do understand, but unfortunately I just didn't connect with the story. I didn't really like it. I found it very, very boring. So this was again a 2-star read. Icebreaker and Wildfire by Hannah Grace. I've been putting off Icebreaker for a really, really long time because I was worried that there would just be smut and there'd be no storyline, because that's kind of what people made it sound like. But honestly, it wasn't even that bad because I don't really like spice in books unless it's done really well. Very intimidated, but I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and then I went into Wildfire when it came out and I gave Wildfire 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I think it's one of the best like contemporary romances I've ever read. I just loved the setting of both of these books, and I cannot wait for the 3rd book to come out and see Henry's story. All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. I listened to this one as an audiobook as well. Absolutely loved it. I think Mariana Zapata writes the best slow burn romances. Like I don't think anyone can beat her slow burns, and I gave this one 5 stars. One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I do not see enough people talking about this book. I went into this not expecting to love it as much as I did. Again, I feel like I have very low expectations for some books and then they just exceed my expectations. So I think I gave this one 4.5 stars. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I love the way the story all came together. Beach Read by Emily Henry. I started reading this last year or the year before, and I DNF'd it halfway through. As you can tell, there's some really horrible tabs in there, and so I decided to pick it up again this year as an audiobook, and I absolutely loved it. I cannot believe I DNF'd this book because it was so good. I loved the message in it. I loved the depth to the characters, and I loved the relationship in this book. Even though it's like one of those original like book talk hyped up books, I do understand the hype and I understand why people love it, and so this one was a 5-star read. Then I went into Happy Place by Emily Henry. This was a new release this year. I actually enjoyed this one a lot more than I thought I would. It wasn't as good as Beach Read in my opinion, but I still did thoroughly enjoy this, and I gave it 4 or 4.5 stars. Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. I read this towards the beginning of the year and I read it in paperback form. I don't know why I didn't get the paperback down that I annotated, but this book is so beautiful. I loved the relationship in this book as well. I think these 2 characters are one of my favorite book couples as well, and it was just such a well thought out story, and I just loved everything about it. But it also made me cry multiple times. Fourth Wing and Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I read Fourth Wing when it was going absolutely crazy and every single person on BookTok was reading it, and it was my first ever fantasy. I'd never ever read a fantasy until this book, and I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It was so easy to follow. The world building was really easy, and it was just a very beginner fantasy. But then I went into Iron Flame, and a lot of people seem to hate on me when I talk about not liking this book, but that's just my opinion. I didn't like this book at all. I gave this one 2 stars. I think it was just really hard to follow along with. There was a lot of scenes that just didn't need to be in the book, and I totally understand that there needs to be world building in a fantasy series, but to go from like nothing to all of it chucked into the second book was just really hard, and I just found myself getting bored so many times throughout this book. Still Small Voice by Brenda Stanley. This was actually sent to me by the author. I really enjoyed this book and I think I gave it 4 stars. The No Show by Beth O'Leary. I read this in a reading vlog at the start of the year. I feel like everyone knows my opinion on this book by now. I didn't like it whatsoever, and I don't understand like why. Like this whole story, I was just like, why is this even happening? The whole story felt like a big waste of time to me, honestly, and I gave it 2 stars. Four Aunties and a Wedding by Jessie Sutanto. I gave this one 5 stars. This is the book that comes after Die or A for Aunties, which I also gave 5 stars. And I don't know if there's going to be a third book in this series, but I just eat up these books every single time, and I just love the comedy in them as well. The Selection series by Kiera Cass. I absolutely loved all of these books. These are like YA romances. They're so easy to read. I think they're only like 300 pages each, and I read the whole series in like a couple of months. I'd just pick one up as like a little palette cleanser, and it was just so like quick to get through. But my only like negative or like downside to these books is like they are very YA. Like they almost felt too young for me, but I still did enjoy them. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I went into this book completely blind, having no idea what the aspect even was of this book. All I knew is that it was a fantasy, and this book did not disappoint. I knew it would be a 5-star read from the first like chapter into the book. I just fell in love with it straight away. I was hooked the whole time, and I cannot wait to go into the second book to see where the story goes, because it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. I read the first 2 books in the ACOTAR series, so I read A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. I did enjoy these, don't get me wrong. I just feel like they're not living up to the hype that I thought they would, and that's why I've stopped at this book for now. I sort of like half read them, half listened to them as audiobooks, otherwise I was never going to get through them. And so I gave ACOTAR 4 stars, and I gave ACOMAF 4.5 stars. The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. This was such a cute and easy book to get through. It's also under 300 pages, and I honestly like can't even remember reading it, but I remember everything about this book. Like I don't even know when I read this book, but it was my first Lynn Painter book, and I just fell in love with it. I was obsessed the whole time, and I just loved the relationship in this book and like the whole aspect of this story. Flawless by Elsie Silver, which is the first book in the Chestnut Springs series. This is another series that I started and then have not continued yet, even though I loved this book and gave this book 5 stars. Again, it's a small town romance. It gives off cowboy vibes, and I just loved everything about it, but for some reason I just haven't continued the series. Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I went into this one with very low expectations because I haven't liked The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, and I thought that I wouldn't like any of her books. Don't get me wrong, the whole science aspect of her books definitely makes me feel very stupid, because I feel like it just goes over my head and I don't understand what's happening. But I actually really enjoyed this. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I think the relationship was really just sweet, and I just loved how fast-paced this book was. The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is actually a time travel romance, and I went into this when I saw it all over Bookstagram, and I just saw everyone posting about this book, and the cover honestly just intrigued me from the beginning, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book as well. It was also just a great palette cleanser, and I gave this one 4.5 stars, I believe. Five Survive by Holly Jackson. I think I gave this book 3.5 stars only because I did guess the ending of it, but if you are new into thrillers and you haven't really read any thriller books, I highly recommend this, because I think that you will be hooked from the beginning, and it will just keep you on the edge of your seat the whole time. Obviously, if you haven't read thrillers, you probably won't guess the ending, but because I've read a lot of thrillers, which you'll soon see, that's kind of why I just guessed what was going to happen. Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I gave this one 4 stars. It wasn't like an amazing book, but I loved the whole story, and I loved the way everything came together at the end. I think I even like teared up a little bit in this book, and this is a thriller book, so like you wouldn't expect to like almost cry in a thriller, but because of this whole story and the main character's daughter going missing and everything like that, it was just like, it kind of pulled at my heartstrings a little bit. Do Not Disturb by Frida McFadden. This is one of my favorite Frida McFadden books. I think it's my second favorite book from her, because I did do a ranking over on TikTok of her books. It gives like Bates Motel vibes if you've ever watched that TV show. It's very similar vibes and feelings to that, and I was just hooked from the beginning, like I am with all of her books, and I gave it 5 stars. Then my favorite book from Frida McFadden, We Have Never Lie. I picked this one up because I saw Larry Reed's talking about it and raving about it, and it did not disappoint. This is my favorite book from her. I don't think anything will ever top this, purely because of the setting of the book, and everything that happened in this book was just absolutely crazy. Like there wasn't just one twist in this book. Twists just kept happening, and I kept getting whiplash from this book. And again, it was 5 stars. The Housemaid and The Housemaid's Secret from Frida McFadden. These are the 2 Frida McFadden books that got me into her books. I loved both of these. I can't fault anything about them. I gave both of them 5 stars. I liked The Housemaid's Secret a little bit more, but they were both amazing reads, and they just kept me hooked and engaged the whole time, and that's something that I really struggle with a lot of books. Whisper and Weapon by Lynette Noni. This is a duology. I went into these not expecting to like them, and I was just obsessed from the beginning. I recommend these books all the time now. If you've watched my videos, you'll definitely see me talking about these all the time, and I think these books were just so easy to get through and so fast paced, and they sort of give similar vibes to The Shadow Academy series at the beginning. And these books are also set in Australia, which I loved as well. I don't think I've really ever read a book set in Australia, even though I'm Australian. These were both 5-star reads as well. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This was in my top 5 books of the year. I absolutely loved this book. This was another 6-star read. I feel like I had quite a few 6-star reads this year, but this one just like takes the cake, honestly. This book was just amazing and I loved the relationship in the book. And it was just such a beautiful, like heartbreaking story at the same time. Ruthless Vows is coming out in Australia in like 2 days now and I cannot wait to go and pick it up and start reading it straight away. The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, which is her memoir. I didn't give this a rating because it is her story and it just feels wrong rating a book that's her story, but I did really like this and it felt like her diary, and I'm so glad that she's finally getting a voice and telling us her own story in her own words. At least I hope it's all in her own words, like that's what I'm telling myself. I read the first 3 books in the Addicted/Calloway Sisters series. Addicted to You was 5 stars, Ricochet I gave 4 stars, and Addicted for Now was 5 stars. I just love all the characters in this series. I can't wait to continue this series in 2024, even though I read these at the beginning of 2023 and for some reason I've just been intimidated to continue it. I am very excited for the day that I do because I just love all the characters and I'm obsessed with the Calloway sisters, and the drama in these books alone makes me want to continue this series. Then we have the Knock 'Em Out series by Lucy Score. This is like one of those series that I feel like everyone has read at this point. Things We Never Got Over was 5 stars. Things We Hide from the Light was 4 stars. And Things We Left Behind I gave 3 stars. It just wasn't really what I wanted out of the book and out of Lucian and Sloane's relationship. And I honestly just found myself bored for like majority of this book. And the last physical books I have to talk about is The Magnolia Parks Universe by Jessa Hastings. When I tell you guys, I'm so obsessed with these books and the characters in these books and just everything that happens. These books are all 6-star reads. I highly recommend these. If you have read the first book and didn't like it, I don't think you'll like the rest of the series, but it's just a very like hit or miss series. People either love it or hate it, but I'm just like, I cannot believe I didn't read these books earlier. I really wish that someone convinced me to read them so much quicker because I love everything about them and I cannot wait for the 5th book in this series to come out this year. Now I'm going to go through the books that I either listened to as an audiobook or read on my Kindle, so I don't have physical copies for them. So the first one is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. This is another slow burn romance. It's very similar to All Roads Lead Here, but I just loved both of them so much. This was another 5-star read. Swear on This Life by Renee Carlino. Again, I absolutely loved this book. It was a 5-star read. I loved the whole like aspect of this story. It was something so different and unlike anything I've ever read before, and it was just such a beautiful romance as well. Want to Know a Secret by Frida McFadden. I think I gave this one 5 stars, but I'd probably bump it down to a 4. I did really like it. I loved the YouTuber aspect of it. It was actually following a YouTuber, and most of the time I don't like social media in books. I feel like it was just done differently and I really enjoyed it, and I feel like it's because it hit a bit closer to home. The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. I think I gave this one 4 stars as well. That one was definitely up there with one of my favorite books from her. The Inmate from Frida McFadden. I think this one was also a 4-star read. I think I give most of her books either 4 or 5 stars. I honestly really liked The Inmate, but I think that this next book, Ward D, did it better, and I think it was a very similar story and very similar aspect, but Ward D I gave 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. Indigo Ridge by Devaney Perry. I do have a physical copy, but my mum's borrowing it at the moment. I gave that one 4.5 stars. It's kind of like a romance, but with a like crime sort of like murder subplot, and I really liked that aspect of it because it wasn't just a regular like rom-com sort of romance. Like there was a whole different storyline connected to it. One by One by Frida McFadden. I gave this one 3.75 stars. If you've watched The Blair Witch Project, it gives very similar vibes to that, and I just loved it. I was hooked the whole time, but I did guess the ending of the book, I think. The Perfect Son from Frida McFadden. This one is my least favorite book from her. I didn't really like anything about this book. The whole relationship between the mother and son was just really weird, and I just didn't like any of the characters, so I think I gave that one 3 stars. Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney. I honestly really liked this one. For some reason I can't really remember much about it other than the fact that there's a lot of different points of views that you're following in the book, and that's something I love in a book. I love a book with different point of views because it just connects me to the story so much more. So that one was a 5-star read. Thank You for Listening by Julie Whelan. This one I listened to as an audiobook because it's about an audiobook narrator, and the author of the book narrated her own book as well. So she's writing about an audiobook narrator and she narrates her own book. So I really liked that aspect of it. I listened to the whole audiobook one day when I was doing a puzzle and I gave it 4.5 4.5 stars. A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. I honestly forgot that I read this book until I went back through my Goodreads and saw it, so I didn't really like this book that much. It wasn't like necessarily bad, but it just didn't keep me hooked, and I wasn't really obsessed with it like I am with other thrillers, so I gave that one 3.5 stars. Do You Remember by Freida McFadden. This was another one that I didn't really like that much. I wasn't obsessed with this one. I think that was one of my lowest rated books from her as well. I think I gave that one 3.5 stars. The Co-Worker from Freida McFadden. As you can tell, I read a lot of Freida McFadden books on my Kindle. This one was newly released this year. I actually quite enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars, and the only reason it was 4 stars is because one of the main characters has like an obsession with turtles, and it was just such a weird aspect of the book, and it was honestly just irking me out when I read it. Unhinged by Vera Valentine. This was just a random novella that I decided to pick up as a joke. It's about a romance between a girl and her doorknob. So yeah, I gave that one 1 star, like pretty much 0 stars, like literally no rating for that book. It was absolutely mortifying. And for some reason I went into another one called Stuffed, which is about a girl and her romance with a pillow, and in that one the pillow turns into an anime character with tentacles. In those like 80-page books, they 100% mortified me. Unless you want to read them as a joke, I definitely do not recommend, because they were both like 0 stars. The Ex from Freida McFadden. I actually really liked this one. This was like pleasantly surprising because I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, and I think I gave it 4 stars. The Wife Upstairs from Freida McFadden. This is very similar to Verity by Colleen Hoover. People have said that it's kind of like a carbon copy. I still ate it up. I still really liked it, and I gave it 5 stars. The Gift from Freida McFadden. This is actually a novella, and I didn't really like it. It just left me with a lot of questions unanswered, and I just didn't really like it. If it was done in like a longer book, it would have been a really good book and a really cool aspect, but because it was only a 50-page novella, that I just didn't really get anything out of it. The Surrogate Mother by Freida McFadden. I think I gave this one 3.5 stars. Again, it wasn't really one of my favorites from her. The Good Lie by A.R. Torr. I think I guessed the ending of this one as well. This is like my problem now, because I read so many thrillers, I often guess the ending. So I think that one was 4 stars because it did keep me hooked the whole time, but because I guessed the ending, it just bumped it down a little bit. Brain Damage by Freida McFadden. I just didn't really like that much because it was very repetitive. I felt like every single chapter the same thing was happening. And the last book is Suicide Med by Freida McFadden. This one I actually finished this week. I read it all in one sitting, and I was just obsessed and hooked the whole time. I actually went into this one with very low expectations. It's kind of been the one I've been putting off for a really long time, but we get like 6 different characters' point of view. I just loved that book so much. So that concludes the end of this video and all of the books that I read in 2023. Again, if you want longer reviews of these books, definitely go and watch my monthly reading wrap-ups, because I talk about them a lot more in depth on those videos. But as I said, for this video it would just go for way too long if I was to give in-depth reviews for each book. With all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because it will really help me out. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.